Hi, my name is Emma, and I'm a student from the International Languages Bachelor's degree. And I'm actually cursing a subject that is called Theories of Interpretation, in which I had to make a video project of the topics that we have saw until the end of this term. So I'm going to proceed to talk about those topics. So the first one that I'm going to talk about is the general competences, and starting with language competence. So this topic refers to language on an interpreting level into three sections. They are classified as A, B, and C. A being our mother tongue or mother language, which is going to be the language we learn since we are like little kids. And the language B is going to be the first one we're going to learn. And we have to have like a complete master on those two languages. And then the third one is going to be like another language that we're going to learn, but we are not going to have like a complete master in that. We do need to understand the rules, the grammar, and everything about the language, but it's not going to be like as extensive as the first two. So basically this topic also says that we can't translate or interpret from A to B and B to A, and also we can translate from C to B and A, but not like from A and B to language C. It is suggested that we as interpreters must have like a daily work routine for these three languages, and most important for the first one, and not only because we have the language in our blood, to say it like that, doesn't mean that it doesn't require work. In fact, it's got to be the language that we have the most knowledge of. And yeah, basically that. Now, moving to the textual competence, which refers to basically how idiomatic the interpreter can make a message turn into. We have to avoid the calques and to actually interpret or translate word by word. This technique is called the parroting, and we don't have to focus on all the words the speaker is speaking. We need to focus on the message, and for us to fully get a message, we should not only pay attention to the words that are being spoken, but also to the signs, to the body language, to the tone of the voice, and so on. Anticipation is key because we need to be prepared for what's coming next. And listening and paying attention to what the conversation or the speaking is leading can help us go through like future problems that may come up with something that we might not know. And yeah, that's basically it. Next up is the memory. This topic is divided, not the topic, but like the kind of memory that some interpreters must have control of. The first one is the short-term memory, which only allows us to retain information for only a few seconds, that being just enough to make notes. These notes are going to help us to make the speech work on. The second one is the mid-term memory. This one allows us to retain more information, but it's not permanent, right? So it helps us especially when we are in lesson interpreting, in which we have to use both notes and memory. And the last one is the long-term memory, which is all the knowledge that we get stuck in our brains and we will never forget. Basically, most in fields of work that we are going to be expert. And yeah, it is suggested that we develop or photographic memory because it is said that people tend to remember more when we think of something or images. For example, if the speech is a story, we can like create images in our heads about what the speaker is saying so we can remember the main ideas of what was being said. And that's actually a good tip. Next topic is the general knowledge. Basically, this topic talks about how we must do some researches for every time we're going to make an interpretation, because only by the fact that we are interpreting from one language to another doesn't mean that we are experts in every kind of field and every kind of topics. It is also said that there is going to be times, rough times, where we are not going to be able to do the respect researches, and we're going to find us in a really wrong position. But that is why we should actually make researches all the time about a lot of topics to be prepared for this kind of problems. For example, I'm not really good at maths. So if I'm going to be interpreting a math class and stuff, I'm going to need to be prepared and to understand every kind of aspects and terms that are going to be implied in that interpretation. The following topic is stress, resistance, and management. Stress is one of the worst enemies for interpreters because it doesn't allow them to think properly and to process all the information as it should. And that it's just a matter of time and practice. The more you practice, the more exposure or exposed you are to, in a positive way, to people, and the more you do interpretations, it's going to be less problematic for interpreters. And there's a lot of reasons why we would get triggered by stress. And the first one, I think, and one of the most difficult ones, is like the exposure, like to be in front of a lot of people. And overthink could be one too, because that makes you not think clearly about the present, and you have to stay focused and calmed when you are interpreting something. Now I'm going to talk about the specific personality traits. The first one is the sensitivity to reward. This one makes a person like to increase their ability or to increase the way they do their job, because it leads to a goal and to a reward, basically. The next one is a sensitivity to risk, which makes a person more anxious about committing a mistake, making a mistake. I'm sorry, I don't know if it was like the right term. And that will make that person try to avoid as possible all the mistakes. Next one is the motivation, which basically just helps us like to develop all these other skills in interpreting. And the resilience, which is the one that's going to help us get through rough times. The next topic is attention. This topic basically says that Attention is how we're going to retain information as much as possible because we're carefully listening to the speaker, and we are going to be able to get clear information so we can turn it into the message. This is called like a controlled process because we need to focus on it to make it happen. And it actually says that it can become like an automatic process the more we practice, because at some point we're going to be like completely used to this process, and it's not going to take as much effort as it did before. And the next one is voice and diction, which basically implies how our voice is our main tool on interpreting. So we must control it to make it clear and to make people pay attention to us by our voice. We need to have a good tone, good diction, vocalization, breathing, and so on. Now moving to the translation competence, which is basically the one that's going to help us get one message from one language to another. Alright, so the next topics are equipment, professional, thematic competences. The first one referring to all the tools we may need, those including like language skills and physical equipment such as a microphone and stuff. The professional competence refers to all these topics that makes us a good interpreter, such like ethics, knowledge, and so on. And finally, the last one refers to a particular to general knowledge of topics. Now for psychophysiological competence, which says that us as interpreters must have work or physical competence, because we may be standing for many hours, to be sit down for many hours, to be in uncomfortable positions, to be walking a lot and going upstairs and downstairs. Now I'm going to be talking about specific competences classified by modes. And the first one is a consecutive, and the main competence is note-taking, because it's going to help us a lot to get all the ideas we need to focus on during a speech. And actually we have to focus on ideas because we're going to write down ideas, not words. Because writing words would be more complex, since we would need to write like full sentences and full word ideas to know what we're going to talk about. But instead, we need to write down some of the ideas of what is being talked about. Now going for oratory and communication skills. First, we need to make good eye contact, but that doesn't mean that we need to look somebody right in the eye, especially in the audience, because we're not going to be able to do all of them. Also, it makes us look nervous. Now, after that, we need to have like good voice and voice projection. We need to make the tone of our voice clear and strong, but not too loud. Just make it sound calm and normal. And then the nonverbal language, which is going to help us communicate some messages without speaking. For example, moving our hands, making facial expressions, moving from one side to another, but not making it look like we're just walking around. Basically that. Now it's time for listening and interpreting, and we start touching the first point, which is perfect mastery of cultural differences in styles of communication. It is said that mostly in public services, it's most commonly to see how this cultural barrier becomes a problem, since Even in communication, we have differences from one place to other, for example, in China and in contrast to Mexico. So as an interpreter, our main job is to understand all the other cultures, not only to understand them, but to to practice empathy with them, so we can control these situations where cultural differences make interpreting a problem. In lesson, interpreting is really important to work in team. So here's when the interpersonal competence enters to the stage. And also we need to work with our bidirectionality competence. We need to really master all of the languages we are working with and be able to change directions real quickly. And we need to work with the short-term memory, because in this one is the one that we are going to work with the more. And since we just start talking after the main speaker stops, we don't have really enough time to think a lot, and we need to write down like stuff really quickly. Now, for simultaneous interpreting, it is required to develop our cognitive skills more than the others. It is well known that our cognitive skills are prepared but not like really fully understood. And the first of them is the reasoning skills, which is what makes us think in a logical way. And following that, there is a cognitive processing skill, which is the part of our brain that is going to make us react to a stimulus, or to react to a stimulus, and how fast we do it. And we also need to work with short-term memory. I think it's really important, since you need to retain information like in a really short period of time. Now, referring to note-taking and simultaneous interpreting, why is it important? Well, now it is said that we need to take notes of topics, or just like some things that will pose a threat on our interpreting, like numbers, dates, names of places, and stuff like that. And we also need to develop our teamwork skills, because we will always be working with a team in projects, and we never know when we will need help, and we need to be aware that it may happen and how to deal with it, like in a team. Now it is time to talk about the specific competences depending on the field of expertise. And in the first point, we must know how to work in retour, which means that we have to be able to translate or interpret even from our B language to our A language. And most people say that we should never do that, because I think of the mastery we have on our B language, that it's not the same as we have in our first language, since it's our mother language. Now, talking about diplomacy, which means that we need to know how to behave in a good way. And just because we tend to interact and interpret in formal ways, making us need to behave politely. Now, speaking about public services interpretation, we are going to touch two essential points. The first one being the anticipation, because it is said that when we are in a public service interpretation, we receive a few information and not actually good enough for us to prepare. So we need to be prepared on our own, and knowing our field of expertise and trying to be always as ready And because you never know who are you going to interpret, they just summon people or they get you to the place you're going to be an interpreter, and that's all the information you have. And now, like, separating work from your personal life, because most of the time you're going to be interpreting a person and you're going to be talking in the first person as if the thoughts that you're interpreting are your own, but you need to manage to separate both of them, just to prevent future mental health issues. Now, for management to solve dilemmas, it says that we could face ethical dilemmas, especially when, because of the culture barrier that we have spoken before about. And the more we get to anticipate what our ethical problems will be, the more efficient we get to manage to deal with them. Is an interpreter born or made? It is well known that a lot of people seem to be born with special skills that a lot of us don't have, and interpreting is not the exception. There's a lot of people who know how to handle interpreting without so much knowledge on the field, and some others must practice a lot and a lot and a lot and still feel stuck with some terms or with some practice. But just as anything that requires a lot of practice, the more you do it, the more you get used to it and you learn how to deal with it. There are skills that are going to be harder for some people and easier to others, and so on. What may look easy to me won't look easy to someone, and what would look easy to that someone probably would not be easy for me, and that's how the thing goes. How to practice? At this point, it should be more than clear that we need a lot of practice to become good interpreters, and it's never going to be like something magic that you learn how to be a good interpreter from one day to another. You need to keep practice and be constant with your job. And first of all, you need to identify what are your strong skills and what are your weak ones, so you can focus more on the weak ones to improve them. And that doesn't mean that you need to keep apart the ones that you're good at. It's all about to work them all together. And also you need to supervise your own work. Like, you can do a weekly revision of what you've learned and what you have improved, and keep the work on. You can practice with all different fields, making role plays, practicing with general topics or thematics, and so start practicing with more complex topics. The point is to never stop practicing and to become more efficient in what the problems may come, and you need to learn how to overcome them. Practicar la consecutiva no es tan difícil, sabiendo que puedes hacerlo de distintas maneras. Por ejemplo, podrías reunirte con un grupo en donde una persona puede estar haciendo una interpretación y los demás van a interpretar dicho mensaje, para así observar las competencias de cada uno, aprender de la manera en la que uno es objetivo, hace sus tareas, etcétera, y para darse cuenta uno mismo los altibajos que tiene y poder hacer retroalimentación entre todos. También puede hacerse no necesariamente en un grupo, pero sí con alguien que pueda evaluarte, y sería mejor si es una persona que tiene amplio conocimiento en el campo de la interpretación, y el punto es que siempre estés mejorando tus altos y tus bajos. Y como ya he mencionado anteriormente, se trata todo de practicar y practicar y practicar. Para practicar la simultánea existen muchas sugerencias, sin embargo, la más importante a mi parecer que aparece en el material es hacer cabina muda. Creo que es bastante conveniente el hecho de que estés en una conferencia real o incluso porque en el material especifica que te metes a una cabina real mientras escuchas el mensaje para hacer una interpretación, pero tú lo haces con un micrófono apagado. Sin embargo, yo creo que puede ser muy útil ir a conferencias reales en donde esté habiendo una interpretación y tú hagas tu propia interpretación. Incluso de esa manera puedes comparar tu trabajo con el del intérprete profesional, y así consecutivamente. Asimismo, es muy importante autoevaluarnos y darnos feedback acerca de lo bien que estamos haciendo un trabajo, y específicamente ser muy objetivos con nuestro trabajo para poder ir mejorando. Incluso podríamos hacerlo entre varias personas para poder calificarnos, para poder ser honestos con nuestro trabajo y así poder darnos cuenta de cuáles son nuestras virtudes y nuestros defectos. En el material sugiere que se haga una tabla para ver la fidelidad con la que te estás apegando un mensaje, tu tono, y múltiples características que puedes escribir en la tabla para poder ir mejorando.